US Congress cuts funding to NASA while corporations fund more space missions. A detailed breakdown of the UAP historical report cites glaring deficiencies inside of it. The Space Force budget exceeds NASA, but will grow much more dramatically as secret space programs are secretly integrated. The UFO Disclosure Project attorney Danny Sheehan recounts his encounter with secret Project Blue Book files in 1977 that contained photos of a retrieved downed UFO. Could the Romanian president entering the race for NATO Secretary General be a reward for him suppressing news of a discovery of an ancient hall of records in the Bucegi Mountains? President Eisenhower's role in secret agreements reached with aliens are revealed in his great-granddaughter's first book on his presidency. Afghanistan is another example of a major war ostensibly caused by geopolitics that typically involves deeper exopolitical issues. Analysis of the historical AARO report discusses the July 1952 shoot-down attempt against flying saucers involved in the Washington flyover. And there are 4 primary goals in the AARO historical report pointing to a coming UFO false flag event. These and other stories on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review for March 16. This has been a week that has really been focused on the AARO historical report. There's been a lot of feedback, a lot of cases cited from that report, a lot of responses. So we're going to go through some of those, the ones that I feel are most relevant, and also look at some of the recent news concerning the passage of a bill funding NASA, Space Force, and so forth. So let's begin with this story about the US Congress passing funding for a full year for NASA. But NASA's budget has been trimmed to less than $25 billion. So this is happening at the same time as the budget for Space Force has come from zero in 2019 to currently being close to $30 billion. So it's really surging if you count in its emergence in 2000, only 5 years ago. But the most important thing here is that corporations are funding more and more space missions. So, this leads to a dilemma because as the NASA budget decreases, that means that the only publicly funded civilian space program, which supposedly was responsible for releasing to the general public a lot of scientific data concerning outer space, is getting less and less funding. You get more corporate activities in space, you get more military activities in space, and these are much more opaque. In other words, especially when it comes to corporations, there's no chance that corporations are going to reveal everything that they encounter in space, whereas with NASA, there was always the hope that eventually NASA would release some stuff. So while NASA has been a leading player in the cover-up of extraterrestrial life, UFOs, there is a long-term problem, I think, in increasingly handing over effective control over future space missions to private industry and to military interests. So, what we need is a civilian space agency like NASA, but one that promotes transparency in space operations rather than covers up what's going on in deep space. Because as the military gets bigger and bigger budgets, and you're going to get corporations funding more and more space programs and funding these, there's going to be a need for civilian oversight, or at least civilians scrutinizing what's happening in space, so that there can be some political transparency in what's going on rather than leaving space to be run effectively by the military and by corporations. And that's a very dangerous thing. So, on the one hand, people might be happy that an organization like NASA is being slowly defunded. But I think we do need a civilian space agency devoted to scientific research and peaceful exploration of outer space, but one that promotes transparency rather than a cover-up, which is what NASA's been doing. So here is one of the stories that covers the UAP Historical Report that was released last Friday by the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO Office. And so the report does focus on there being no evidence of extraterrestrials or of retrieved UFO craft. And so this is a big problem because this report did analyze or did cite interviews that were conducted with up to 30 whistleblowers and reached the conclusion, the surprising conclusion after interviewing eyewitnesses, saying that there's no empirical evidence supporting the claims that there are non-human intelligent guided spacecraft that are crashing on Earth and that are being secretly retrieved and reverse engineered in corporate laboratories, that there's no empirical evidence. Well, if you look at that report, I think there's good reason why there's no empirical evidence. I mean, you have to remember Al Capone, like organized crime. I mean, Al Capone was involved in many murders and armed robberies, but the FBI couldn't successfully prosecute him because of lack of evidence, because organized crime, as in the organized cover-up, are very good at finding and removing empirical evidence. In the end, Al Capone was convicted of tax code violations, evading his taxes. So I think the same thing when it comes to the UFO cover-up. I mean, it's exactly, I think, the same system or process. You have, rather than organized crime involved in suppressing and removing evidence of the deeds done, what you have is the military industrial complex that are doing effectively the same thing. Just they're removing all empirical evidence, all evidence that could be cited. But what you have are eyewitnesses. And these are the 30 witnesses that were interviewed by the AARO office in putting together their report. But unfortunately, the AARO office said, well, without empirical evidence, all of these testimonies, they lack any substantive grounds, that they lack empirical data, evidence to support them. And so that led to their conclusion that there is, here's a good example. To date, AARO has not discovered any empirical evidence that any sighting of a UAP represented off-world technology or the existence of a classified program that has not been properly reported to Congress. So, this is a good example. No empirical evidence. Okay, we can understand that because the military-industrial complex is very good at finding and hiding all evidence and prosecuting people that have empirical evidence. I mean, if you have empirical evidence of a unacknowledged special access program, if you have empirical evidence of that, you are breaking the law because you're not supposed to. These are programs that are not acknowledged to exist. So if you have evidence showing that they exist, then you're breaking the law. So it's clear that this kind of evidence is going to be hard to come by. But to use that as the justification for saying that up to 30 witnesses that have come forward and been interviewed by the AARO office talking about their direct participation in UAP-related special access programs where these retrieved UFO craft are being studied and reverse engineered, and you say, well, these first-hand witness testimonies don't amount to much because there's no empirical evidence. You're denying something that is admissible in a court of law because, as we all know, eyewitness testimony is admissible. And if you have 30 people coming together in a court of law saying that, yeah, I saw that there was a program in existence involving retrieved UFO craft that are of non-human origins, and that these are being secretly studied and reverse engineered in corporate laboratories. If you have 30 witnesses saying that, well, that's a slam dunk. You're going to win that court case. But the AARO office is, I think, trying to pull a fast one over the American public and the world public by saying, well, there's no empirical evidence, which is not a great surprise for reasons I already stated. So here is a ABC News story which followed after the AARO Historical Report was released, and it mirrors the similar stories in many mainstream news articles that came out after last Friday's AARO report, and that is that the report effectively debunks the extraterrestrial hypothesis for UFOs going back many decades. So what's happening here is that the mainstream media that are running, or they are putting out stories about this historical report from the AARO office that debunks all claims of secretly retrieved flying saucer craft that are being studied and that these are non-human in origins, that it's being debunked. So the mainstream media is putting out lots of stories about how this historical report says there's nothing to see here. So the public essentially is being told to go back to sleep on the UFO issue until we tell you otherwise. So I think this is very important, that the AARO report comes out. Of course, UFO researchers, immediately spot the problems with it, as I've already stated, that there are glaring problems here, as that story in the debrief also pointed out the glaring deficiencies in that AARO report. But the mainstream media is nevertheless putting out the main elements or the talking points from that AARO report, saying that there's really nothing to this whole UFO phenomenon. It's just a result of over-imagination, lots of speculation by UFO believers and people that are influenced by the UFO crowd. So that's really the mainstream narrative that has emerged out of the AARO report, and it's been put out by major news sources such as ABC, and that's very unfortunate, because it really is kind of, I think, delaying things, pushing things back. So, Pentagon study finds no sign of alien life in reported UFO sightings going back decades. So, the mainstream media is really telling the general public, go back to sleep, nothing to see here. So why is that? Well, I will come back to that. Okay, so here's another reaction to the AARO office, and this one discusses the many problems inside of it, and this is a story in the Liberation Times. This is Christopher Sharp wrote this article, and so he puts out a good overview and analysis of the AARO report, and he believes that the Pentagon is heading to disaster because of this report not really being transparent, not really being honest, that there are many lies within this report. And I agree with all of that. Now, this is where I think that there's something that a lot of UFO researchers are latching onto, that they believe, and Chris Sharp, the author of this article in the Liberation Times, he's no exception. He believes that there's going to be a phoenix-like resurrection of the gutted UAP Disclosure Act that saves the day for disclosure and destroys the Pentagon agenda. So the UAP Disclosure Act, that was initially included in the Senate version for the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024, when it went to a reconciliation committee involving members of both the Senate and the House of Representatives. It was gutted because of opposition by the chairs of the House Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee. So it was gutted, and only the creation of a UAP records collection in the National Archives was passed. So Chris Sharp, as well as many other UFO researchers, they believe that the UAP Disclosure Act is going to be resurrected. And it does seem that there is going to be a genuine attempt to propose it and include it in the as either a standalone bill or in the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act. So this is something that is being proposed. People like Chuck Schumer in the Senate are indicating that they do want to give the UAP Disclosure Act another attempt for passage. Now, this is where I think there's a problem here with a lot of UFO researchers that do count on the congressional process. I mean, this is the big difference, I think, between myself and a lot of UFO researchers. They believe that the US Congress at some point is going to ride in and kind of save the day because rationality is going to dominate. Well, I think that's pretty naive because I don't think that the passage of bills in the US Congress is due to what's rational or what's reasonable. It's all about the power of hidden vested interests and lobbies. And they are very good at intervening at the 11th hour, just as we saw with the UAP Disclosure Act for 2020 that was included in the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, that at the 11th hour, it was gutted, it was removed because various aerospace corporations, they didn't want something like this being passed because it had provisions in it, such as eminent domain, which, according to the corporations, were a threat. So they didn't want to have anything to do with that. And so I think also there's a lot of hope that there's going to be more whistleblowers coming forward, like David Grush, who are going to talk about what they know, and that's good because I support David Grush and what he did, and look forward to more people like David Grush coming forward. But nevertheless, we need to look at what happened to him. That there's a lot of pushback, there's a lot of attempts to discredit and dismiss him, and I think this is something that's going to have a deterrent effect on future whistleblowers. So we shouldn't pin all our hopes on more whistleblowers like David Grush coming forward saying that, yes, I saw evidence of retrieved flying saucer craft in a corporate project that I was involved in, and we know that this was non-human intelligence and so forth, because whatever that whistleblower insider reveals, there's always going to be those that are going to attack that particular witness, and just as we saw with David Grush. And so I think what's going to more likely is going to happen is there's going to be some catastrophic disclosure event. And to me, what's going to most likely occur is that there's going to be a false flag alien event that's organized by the deep state that really shocks the public in terms of some kind of UFO related event that leads to, say, a lot of destruction. Whether we're talking about cities, whether we're talking about areas of a country, that there's going to be destructive events attributed to UFOs, and that's going to shock the general public. And I think that this is going to be part of a false flag event. And I'll come back to this later. But on the other hand, there's also, I think, going to be a catastrophic disclosure in terms of positive extraterrestrials and inner Earth civilizations, or hidden space arcs, all finally revealing themselves. Because the thing is, while we're seeing this kind of struggle with the US Congress and with the UAP disclosure initiatives that are coming forward, it's almost like a one step forward that's organized by the White Hats to alert the public that, oh yeah, look at what David Grush is saying. Look at all of these reports that are now being released concerning military sightings of UFOs and so forth. But then you have a step back where you have like the AARO office issuing denials or kind of like trying to walk back whatever disclosures have been made by whistleblowers. That kind of back and forth, that's going to be eclipsed by these catastrophic disclosure events, either involving a contrived alien event or a genuine alien event, or something involving inner Earth civilizations and space arcs. Because ultimately, what I think is driving disclosure is not because of a few people in Congress suddenly being open to this phenomenon. It's because there's millions of people around the world that are now interested in UFOs and are ready for the truth. And the thing is, our planet's consciousness, the population of Earth, is constantly being monitored by both inner Earth civilizations and visiting extraterrestrial civilizations. So they look at the consciousness of humanity as a whole, 8 billion people, and they, based on their analysis and their measurements of their consciousness, they can say, oh, humanity's ready for us. That, okay, the elites want to stop us, but the collective consciousness wants this to happen. So we feel that that is sufficient for us to reveal ourselves. In other words, the collective consciousness wanting extraterrestrials to reveal themselves is something that the extraterrestrials can say with good reason that that's sufficient for us to do so. So, and I'm sure the deep state knows this. So I think we are headed for catastrophic disclosure. Now, one of the things, here's the trailer for my latest webinar that's coming up in 1 week. That's on March 23. And in this particular webinar, what I wanted to do was to focus on the non-human crypto-terrestrials. In some of my previous webinars, I focused on or discussed human human inner Earth civilizations. That is, beings that are related to surface human civilizations that many millennia ago decided to go into underground systems. In this new webinar, I wanted to focus on non-human inner Earth civilizations, especially as there are reports saying that these non-human civilizations in the inner Earth have been on our planet a lot longer than humans, that humanity are in fact the most recent arrival, or the most recent genetic experiments on the surface of the planet Earth involving humans, that I've discussed this at length, involving these 24 extraterrestrial civilizations, that these human experiments follow on from much earlier, much older, going back many millions of years, non-human civilizations on planet Earth. So that's what I look forward to discussing in my next webinar in 1 week's time. So I hope you can join me for that. We do have a trailer, so you can just go to my website, exopolitics.org, to watch the trailer, to get a little bit more an idea of that particular webinar. So, Ancient Alien Experiments and Earth's Crypto-Terrestrials. Okay, so here's something that I thought is well worth mentioning. Now, the United States Space Force's budget now is approximately $30 billion, so exceeds NASA's budget by 20%, but it's going to grow much more dramatically as these secret space programs that have been funded over the decades by a CIA black budget that gathers funds from all of these illicit revenue generating schemes, whether it's white collar crime, pumping up economics on Wall Street, the drug trade, arms trade, human trafficking. The CIA is involved in these, and the CIA uses those as a means of generating many billions of dollars. I mean, estimates of the CIA's black budget. There's two CIA black budgets actually. One is actually congressionally mandated. So, and that's approximately about $75 billion a year that goes into funding all of the intelligence community, which I think is around 24 intelligence. 24 entities make up the intelligence community in the United States, and the CIA's black budget funds those. And it's the official black budget is around $75 billion, and all members of Congress know about this. And it's just they understand that that this is the way you hide how much is going into the CIA's intelligence activities. So you can more effectively hide sources and methods from foreign competitors. But what's not well known is that that is actually only one black budget. There's a deeper black budget, as I said, that relies on funding from all of these illicit sources that has been used to fund secret space programs for decades. So now with the creation of Space Force and Space Force having its own independent budget, that is starting to grow significantly as the Space Force begins to integrate more of these secret space program assets. The Space Force budget is going to grow dramatically so that it can fund all of those things. So right now the Space Force budget is $30 billion, but as Space Force starts to integrate key elements of the secret space program that was put together by the United States Air Force, fleets of TR-3Bs, flying saucers and so forth, Space Force budget will grow so that you can actually maintain these fleets. Of course, that's all going to be presented as new spacecraft. People won't know that they've been around for decades. Space Force will proclaim at some point that, oh, look what Lockheed and Northrop Grumman and Boeing have developed for us. All these bright, shiny, flying triangles, flying rectangles, flying saucer craft, and so these will obviously be very expensive, and the Space Force budget will grow tremendously from $30 billion a year. And just to give you an idea, the budget for the United States Air Force is $200 billion, over $200 billion. So imagine eventually Space Force's budget is going to be very similar to that as they start to integrate all of these secret space programs. And of course, then you have the Navy's Solar Warden program, which will need to be integrated as well. But I think that'll be done with the creation of a department of the Space Force, because at the moment, the Space Force is a military service which is subordinate to the Department of the Air Force. And so I think that will aggregate all of the Air Force's secret space program. But when the day arrives for the integration of the Navy's secret space program, that's when you're going to have the creation of a Department of Space Force. Okay, so here's a video featuring Disclosure Project attorney Danny Sheehan, where he recounts his encounter in 1977 with a Project Blue Book files that had photos of retrieved flying saucers. And he says that he went to this location in the newly completed, I think it was the James Madison apartment or the James Madison complex at the Congress. And he went there and he was taken to an underground secure vault where he saw a file concerning Project Blue Book. And he says that in these files, he went through it, it was a thick folder full of documents and so forth. But he said he saw some pictures as well of flying saucer craft. And he had with him a notepad. And he says that he traced one of these or several of these photos involving spacecraft. And he took them back with him and gave those sketch drawings, which he hid under his armpit when he exited, and he gave those drawings to the Jesuit college, or he was at the time an attorney for the United States Jesuit Society that has an office in Washington, D.C., and he gave that to the Jesuit office, and that was the last he saw of it, and presumably it went off to the Vatican, and he's there. But he says that he went and personally briefed Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick about this, that yes, he saw secret Project Blue Book files. He saw both documents and pictures of retrieved alien spacecraft, that he actually etched some of these craft. He didn't have the etchings or the tracings, but he told Dr. Kirkpatrick this, and in the AARO report, Dr. Kirkpatrick said that Sheehan's testimony and all of the other testimonies that he encountered during his interviews with whistleblowers and insiders, that they had no empirical evidence supporting that. Now, of course, what Danny Sheehan is saying is that, well, there is empirical evidence. I saw it. I saw the photos. It's there. You just got to go find it. And of course, the AARO office, Sean Kirkpatrick can turn around and say, well, we tried and we wrote a nice polite letter to the National Archives and asked them to give us access to this secure vault, apparently. And they said, no such vault exists. So, okay, they say no such vault exists. So, I mean, clearly, you're not going to get access to these classified archives concerning UFOs, extraterrestrial life, by asking politely, which is why the UAP Disclosure Act had within it the power of subpoena and also the power of eminent domain, whereby there would be the creation of a 9-person review board that would be able to gain access to such files. But AARO doesn't have that kind of power. So Kirkpatrick just said, well, there's no evidence of it there. And that's, I think, his great failing, because 30 witnesses saying, we saw the evidence, it's there, and this is what we saw. And Kirkpatrick didn't acknowledge that. He just said, I interviewed 30 people, and there was no empirical evidence that anything that they said is true. Well, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. So that is a shame. So, yeah, there's an interview that Danny Sheehan did with Australian investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, where he recounts that 1977 incident where he went into this secure vault in the James Madison building and he saw the secret Project Blue Book files. Well, this was something that I thought was very, very interesting. So this is a story that is covered by RT.com, which I believe is banned in certain places in Europe. You cannot read or watch RT news, but thankfully here in the United States, we still can access the RT website. So this was a story concerning the Romanian president entering the race for the NATO leadership. So there is the Dutch Prime Minister is supposedly the front runner for this, but apparently he faces a serious roadblock because the leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, just detests Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, and there needs to be consensus amongst NATO members for the Secretary General. And so, if the Hungarians hold firm to their disdain of the nomination of Mark Rutte to be the NATO leader, then they will have to seriously look elsewhere. And this particular individual, the president of Romania, Klaus Iohannis, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Apologies if I've mispronounced it. He's entered the candidacy. And so the question that came into my mind when I heard about this is, well, this guy's been president of Romania since I think it was around 2014 when he became president of Romania. And was his entering his name or his name being entered into the race for the NATO Secretary General a reward for him during his presidency for covering up the news that Romania has discovered an ancient hall of records, as has been claimed by a series of books by a insider who uses the pseudonym Radu Cinema. And so far there's a 7-volume series of books that discusses this incredible discovery under Mount Bucegi and under this Romanian Sphinx in particular. And this discovery was made in 2003, and soon after that, Romania was fast-tracked into NATO. So here you have NATO looking for a new Secretary General. Romania has kept secret the existence of this ancient hall of records with incredible advanced technologies, life-changing technologies. Romania has played ball, even though there has been, according to Radu Cinema, the author of that 7-volume series, a tremendous push within Romania to reveal these secrets, that this is somehow the destiny of Romania, to reveal the existence of these ancient hall of records, which dates to Atlantis or to the pre-Diluvian civilizations on planet Earth. But there have been powerful people in Romania that have worked with a global deep state, in particular Freemasons, to suppress the information. So I think Romanian President Klaus Iohannis has played ball with the deep state, with the global Freemasonry, in suppressing news of the discovery of this ancient hall of records. So his reward for doing that is NATO Secretary General. That's the way things are done in our world. Okay, so here's an interview I did with Laura Eisenhower, who has just had her new book published, Awakening the Truth Frequency. So I've known Laura for, I think it was around 2008 that we first began talking. So it's been 15, 16 years now that I've known Laura. And she is brilliant. She is truly someone that has some brilliant insights. And so I've been encouraging her, along with others, to write a book where she shares some of what she has learned. And so she wrote her book. So her first book has come out, Awakening the Truth Frequency. So I think there's a lot of good material in here. There's also material in there that I disagree with. And so we had a good discussion about things that I agreed with and disagreed with. I think the main point of contention was there was a claim that during the Truman administration that there was an unconditional surrender of the United States Congress to the German Nazi breakaway civilization in Antarctica. So we discussed that. I don't think there was an unconditional surrender. I think what happened was that there was more of a covert takeover. And so it's well worth looking at that, as well as some of the other areas that we discussed. But her book really does open up a lot of issues. So I highly recommend you take a look at her book to understand some of the issues. I think we need to kind of look closely at, but overall, definitely a book worth getting for your library. Okay, so here's a post by this individual, Ganon, who is someone that I think he's got his finger on the pulse of a lot of things. So he is someone that is saying that there has been a report that circulated online since 2012 saying that the real reason for the US military and CIA involvement in Afghanistan wasn't the drug trade. It wasn't just the drug trade, because I mean, these kinds of interventions often have multiple factors behind them. Drug trade would be one, but that the U.S. defense industry, intelligence community, could gain control over 5,000-year-old technology discovered in an Afghan cave around 10 years prior. So the discovery by US Pentagon scientists, according to this report, was of a Vimana trapped in a collapsed time well, which had caused the disappearance of at least 8 American soldiers trying to remove it between 2006 and 2012. Of course, in ancient Vedic texts, you have the Mahabharata that describes Vimanas as these spacecraft or these flying vehicles that could be very large. So 12 cubits, as I recall, I think the 12 cubits, I think a cubit was a half a meter, if I recall. So that would be 6 meters. A Vimana 6 meters in circumference. So we're talking something 6 meters in circumference. So we're talking about something that we today would identify as a flying saucer, a kind of moderately sized flying saucer. So here's a kind of like in ancient Vedic traditions, you have these kind of diagrams, many of these diagrams that represent the ancient Vimanas that were ubiquitous in ancient India or in Vedic India. So overall, I think that this is one of the great truths concerning geopolitics, that while world events, especially military interventions, often are described in terms of geopolitics, where different powers contest for dominance over a particular territory, or because there's a particular ideology or a terrorist threat or whatever it is, that really there's a deeper exopolitical factor involved. Earlier on, I mentioned Romania, the discovery of this ancient hall of records in 2003, and the Romanian government was given an ultimatum, really, play ball, and we will help you retrieve this technology, and we will fast track you into NATO and so forth. Otherwise, there'll be consequences. And so Romania was fast tracked into NATO, and the result of that is that Romania has flourished in NATO, and now the Romanian president may become the next NATO Secretary General. And in my first book on exopolitics that came out in 2004, Exopolitics, Political Implications of the Extraterrestrial Presence, I talk about the Stargate in Iraq in 2003, that the real reason for the military intervention in Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, the 2001 terrorist attacks in the United States, but in fact was all about getting control of these ancient stargates and cuneiform texts in Iraq that were being uncovered and were being shared with the Germans, the Chinese, and the Russians. And that was something the United States would not allow. And so we had the intervention. Okay, so here's a short video put out by JP. And for those that are not familiar with JP, he is currently serving in the US Army. I've known him since 2008. And in 2019, he joined the US Army after being kind of like pressured, or at least counseled that it would be really a good idea for him to join the US military, because he would have more access to special access programs, because he's been a contactee, and the military and corporate contractors use contactees to gain access or to learn about advanced technologies. They know that advanced technologies are activated by the consciousness and the genetics of individuals that have some connection to that, through genetics, through reincarnation, star seeds and so forth. So JP is one of these people. He's been serving with the US Army for 5 years now. And so he created his own YouTube channel where he could release his own reflections on the extensive reports he's been releasing through me. There's currently 30 reports, updates, I call them, on JP. And there are 2 books about JP's reports, and the 3rd book is in preparation. And JP's website is JP. You can go to YouTube, and it's just youtube.com/JP1, and you will be able to subscribe to his YouTube channel. And so here he posted his a reflection, a short video he made where he discusses extraterrestrials monitoring our planet and how they decide who to contact, who they're going to make contact with. And it's all about developing high consciousness, developing the love frequency, spending a lot of time in nature, and just being more loving and more connected to nature. I mean, the bottom line is to just do that. And on the contrast, you have the war propaganda driving humanity to war. And he's saying that the ETs, the benevolent ones, they're more attracted to us developing connections to nature, being more loving. So you just get his firsthand, his reflections on what he has learned through his direct face-to-face contacts with extraterrestrials, what they value, what they are looking for in terms of individuals making contact with them. So he discusses all of this. So well worth acknowledging the importance of doing this. I know it's, for many people, it might be a challenge to get out into nature, but I used to live in Washington, D.C. I lived in the Washington, D.C. area for eight years while I was at American University. But there was always nature I could find. I mean, I lived for a few years right next to Rock Creek Park, even though I was living in the center of Washington, D.C., in Cleveland, the Cleveland Park area. There was still Rock Creek Park. So you can always find nature and spend time in nature. And I always spent an hour or so walking in nature just to be connected to that. And of course, developing love, connection with nature, animals, and so forth. So that's really the key for developing contact, and also for being able to access advanced extraterrestrial technologies, whether we're talking about their spacecraft, whether we're talking about retrieved technologies. Okay, so here's something that is, I thought, something I wanted to point out that is very relevant to my upcoming webinar on March 23. So here's some artwork from a Japanese temple. This temple was completed in 607 AD. So we're talking something that's over 1,400 years old. And it shows what clearly is a reptilian-looking creature sitting in a folded leg position. And the temple was made to depict the healing power of Buddha. But why a reptilian? So what's quite clear here is that this reptilian is part of the historic memory of Japanese society, where there was a day where these reptilian beings openly interacted with surface humanity, and they were known for their healing abilities. So this shows that reptilians, that when we think of reptilian aliens or reptilian extraterrestrials, we need to look at the big picture here, and we need to look at different factions, because it's not just in Japan that you have reptilians being depicted as healers, as being wisdom teachers and so forth. This also appears in Vedic Indian literature. So these are indigenous reptilians that have been living on Earth for millions of years. They live in deep underground facilities, and they even predate the human presence on Earth. And so we need to learn about this. We need to be educated about these ancient indigenous reptilians, because they are very, very different to the Draco reptilians, who are really off-world invaders. So I'll talk about that in my webinar, exactly why this distinction is important and how it works. So, but definitely get used to the idea, because I think that is something that is going to happen, because one day we're going to witness reptilians walking amongst us, and they're not all bad guys. I mean, some of them are very wise healers and beings that can help us step into this incredible future of becoming a galactic society. So that's very important. So I look forward to talking more about that in my webinar. Okay, so here's another article concerning the AARO Historical Report. And this one focuses on the July 1952 shoot-down attempt against a flying saucer involved in the Washington, D.C. flyover. So this particular debrief article goes into analysis into how the AARO Historical Report really focused or mistakenly discussed a later book concerning this 1952 shoot-down event, which had some mistakes in it, and those mistakes were then relayed into the 1969 Condon Report and then incorporated into the AARO Historical Report. And what this article does is point out that there's an older, more accurate source about this 1952 shoot-down incident involving a small flying saucer drone that was contained in I think it was a 1955 book by Major Donald Kehoe, where he discussed this shoot-down attempt. And I think what this does is it supports claims that there had been shoot-down orders issued against flying saucers in the summer of 1952, and that those orders were actually carried out or attempted against some of the flying saucer craft. And actually there was some debris from one of these shoot-down attempts. Just a small chunk of a flying saucer was captured. And what I find particularly interesting about this incident is that it supports that indeed that there was shoot-down orders issued by President Truman, and that no less than Albert Einstein, Professor Einstein, actually advised Truman to revoke the shoot-down orders. Now, there's some other factors concerning that 1952 incident that I think are worth taking a look at. One is that George Van Tassel, the famous American contactee, just before those sightings, he says that he received a telepathic communication from the Ashtar Command saying that the Ashtar Command wanted the US Air Force to discontinue all study or all programs concerning the development of thermonuclear weapons. So this was a message that Van Tassel sent off by mail just prior to the Washington flyovers, and he was told in the message that the Ashtar Command would reveal itself, that, and that happened. He sent off that letter just before the flyover. So the takeaway from that is that some of those flying saucer craft that were seen over Washington, D.C. likely involved the Ashtar Command. Now, there's also good reason to believe that more of those craft, or some of those craft, also belonged to a breakaway German colony in Antarctica with their own anti-gravity flying saucer craft that were doing overflights of the United States in the 1940s and early 1950s. And so they did the overflights of Washington, D.C. to pressure the Truman administration into signing or starting negotiations. And I mentioned earlier Laura Eisenhower's book, where she cited a whistleblower claiming that this was when the US Congress allegedly surrendered to the German breakaway colony in Antarctica. I don't think it happened like that at all. I disagree with that. But I think the process began at that point. So I agree that something happened involving the Antarctica-based Germans, and that process ultimately led in the 1950s during the Eisenhower administration to agreements being reached with this breakaway German colony in Antarctica. So it's very interesting that this AARO Historical Report does discuss this 1952 shoot-down event, because I think it's a very critical piece of history that we will learn more about as the months and years unfold. Okay, so here is what I wanted to give you in terms of my own personal reflections on the AARO Historical Report. So in this particular tweet, I give you the link to the AARO report. So there it is. It's on the AARO website, so aaro.mil portal. So if you go there, and there it is, it's a 63-page document. Definitely something that clearly is setting out to debunk the UFO being a extraterrestrial craft or non-human intelligent craft of some kind. So, here are what I think are the four key goals that stand out for me in going through the AARO Historical Report, and especially the executive summary, if you go through that. So it dismisses the claims of up to 30 whistleblowers that were interviewed. So, yep, it acknowledges that the AARO office, especially Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, did interview 30 whistleblowers, whether we're talking about Danny Sheehan, David Grush, and others, that they testified that, yes, I saw this, I saw that, but these claims were dismissed, as I said, because the AARO office claims, oh, there was no empirical data or evidence that backed up these testimonies. So those testimonies were dismissed. The second was to dismiss claims of reverse engineering projects of recovered non-human intelligent spacecraft as, again, lacking evidence. So the same thing, saying that, okay, well, there are these claims of these reverse engineering projects, special access programs occurring in various corporations, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Aerospace, and so forth. Well, the AARO office claiming that, well, there's no evidence that these reverse engineering projects exist at all. So I won't labor that particular point. The third goal, I think, is to emphasize that UFOs are an unknown national security threat. So this is the key. I think that historical report, it debunks whistleblower claims that, you know, these are non-human or extraterrestrial related. It debunks claims that these retrieved craft have been secretly reverse engineered and are flying around up there. So it is debunking those claims. It's saying that, oh, no, as far as the AARO report is concerned, the AARO office is concerned, we find no evidence that those UFOs you see up there are either belonging to some extraterrestrial civilization or are reverse engineered spacecraft. There's no evidence for that. But at the same time, they're saying that the UFO phenomenon is real and it constitutes an unknown national security threat. And I think that's very important, because it's saying that, okay, on the one hand, they're not extraterrestrial related, they're not reverse engineered craft belonging to some secret space program that the US or other major nations have, that these are unknown craft. And I think what it's doing is it's conditioning people, it's conditioning the American public to just grow comfortable with the idea that, well, there are these UFOs flying around out there. We don't know what they are, but they're real. They're a national security threat. They violate our airspace. Aircraft safety is being violated. The secure military facilities are being violated. And so we don't know what they are, but it's real. It's a national security threat. So take it seriously. So, that is very puzzling. Why are they doing this? And I think this is where we get into what I think is the true goal here. And this is they're giving mainstream media talking points that they can use to debunk witnesses and whistleblowers talking about UFOs being non-human, whether ET, whether being inner Earth civilizations, or being reverse engineered space program. So what they're doing, what this report does, if you look at through those 60 pages of that report and you kind of pass through it, what it's doing is giving mainstream media all these talking points to say, no, there's nothing to this. These are not extraterrestrial spacecraft. There's no evidence that these are extraterrestrial spacecraft. There's no evidence that these are inner Earth. There's no evidence that these are reverse engineered spacecraft belonging to an American or any other foreign adversary. There's no evidence of that, but they are real and they do constitute a national security threat. So why are they doing that? I think the real goal of this AARO report is that it sets the stage for a false flag alien event that leaves everyone in a state of confusion. Because to me, this is how the deep state operates. It operates by confusing people, by leaving things opaque, unknown, and so you don't know what's going on. So you have the media now. The mass media is armed to the teeth. What you've got now is this AARO report arms the mainstream media to the teeth with all the talking points it needs to put out a narrative that we don't know what these UFOs are, but we can be certain that that there's no empirical evidence that they're anti-gravity craft, secret space programs, extraterrestrial craft, and so forth. But we can say for certain that they are a national security threat that threaten air safety, that are violating the airspace of our most secure military facilities, and so we need to respond to that. So I think it sets the stage for a false flag UFO event where some of these UFOs that are like not known, the mainstream media is going to put out that narrative. We don't know what they are, but they're going to attack or they're going to destroy something. False flag attack is going to happen, I think. And they're not going to pin it on anything, because I think that the deep state has done its studies. It knows that people like Stephen Greer, that there have been UFO researchers going all the way back to Serge Monast in the 1990s, are talking about Project Bluebeam, talking about false flag alien attacks. So the alternative media are ready for this. We're ready to debunk it. So what I think the deep state has done is to come up with a way of proceeding with a false flag UFO event without claiming that it's related to extraterrestrials. And I think that's what this AARO report really does. So that is, these are the top stories that I wanted to cover. Again, on March 23rd, 1 week from today, I will have my webinar for this month, and it is, I think, going to be focusing on a very important issue, the crypto-terrestrials, and I will, as I try to do in all my webinars, related to what is happening right now. So you're not just going to be presented with a lot of historical data about crypto-terrestrials going back millions and hundreds of thousands of years. I will present that, but I'll relate it to what's going on today, because I think the crypto-terrestrials are going to be playing an important event in the awakening of humanity, in the great reveal and the great disclosures that lie ahead. So just go to my website, exopolitics.org, to get more information about this upcoming webinar, the crypto-terrestrials. And don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video so that you can let others know what's going on, and that will help overcome the algorithms that YouTube uses to suppress this kind of content. So thank you for watching and supporting my research, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.